Hi, and welcome back to the Switch Show. Thank you for tuning in and thank you for joining on today's episode. We have another interesting topic to talk about. This is something that I want to sort of use to cap off the month of March. Let's get right into it. But before we get into it, you know the drill. Follow, share, leave us a rating, leave a comment. Follow us on our social media handles. All the links will be down below. Be sure to send us a message. If you want to reach out, you can reach out through the social media handles. If that's something you want to do, leave a comment so that the algorithm pushes it forward and everything. I'm going to come back at the end of the episode to just go over this, but I just thought to say at the beginning. So let's talk about abundance today. I'm going to do an episode on scarcity. But before we get to the episode on scarcity, let's talk about abundance. I want to use this as a kind of a precursor into our series that we'll be having in the month of April. So if you're not aware, we're going to be doing a series on salvation in the month of April. There are five interesting conversations, five interesting discussions about salvation that I would absolutely love for you all to be a part of. We're going to talk about the facts, we're going to talk about the works, the gifts, and leading up to a rousing conclusion. But I digress. I don't want to get ahead of myself. We're talking about abundance today. And the reason why this is a particularly interesting and necessary topic to be discussed is the fact that we're living in such difficult times. We're living in difficult times. I do not know where you're listening from. I do not know what the state of your country is. But from my own view, from my point of view, I do not see the time we're living in as something that is particular to one country. Every country is going through a cycle of change. They could be going through the positive aspect of that cycle. They could be going through the negative aspect of that cycle. So wherever you fall on the spectrum can influence how you perceive this topic to be. But in the moment, right here, right now, I'm living in Nigeria. And though it pains me to say we are more or less on the negative side of that cycle of the cycle of change. Now, when I say change, a lot of people will not agree with me because change was the message. Yeah, because change was the message that was spread or used on the campaign front by the ruling political party, and it carries some sense of PTSD for Nigerians. I am very very particular about how I use the word change because change for me has always carried a neutral connotation because as the popular saying goes, change is constant. And so at some point in your life you're expected to expect change. You need to expect change if you're going to see any real progress, if you're going to see any real shift in your life, monumental or otherwise, you need to expect change more or less. You want to grow up, you want to be able to take care of yourself, establish some financial security, uh, build wealth for yourself, and then find a lovely woman, get married, have a bunch of kids or one or two kids, which is still a bunch, and leave leave a lasting legacy, whatever it is. Before you go from point A to point C, you have to pass through point B, and before you even get to point B, there's a lot of change that has to happen. And so when you stay in a place where change was the message and then you didn't see actual change can have a negative connotation to you. And so when you have been tang- tangling or you've been dancing with negativity for a long time, at least not maybe not personally, but on a broader scope, nationally, it seems like negativity is the order of the day, is the ordeal. Everybody wakes up instead of a newfound sense of appreciation for life. Everybody wakes up with worry. Everybody wakes up with anxiety. Everybody wakes up with too much weight on their shoulders, thinking, where do I get my next meal from? Where do I get my next paycheck from? Oh, what I'm currently earning as a salary isn't enough to fend for myself. So, how am I supposed to be involved with anyone romantically and think of marriage? Everybody more or less is in survival mode. And it's very, very easy to be stuck in survival mode for the rest of your life because it's safe. It's safe. All right. It really is safe. All you think about is make just enough money to foot my bills, to take care of myself, to eat. If by hook or by crook you get married, your mind still thinks survival. How do I fend for these people just so they can eat? You're not really thinking about anything more than the basic necessities: food, shelter, clothing. And that's not such a bad thing. I mean, the every other thing is a luxury. Cars, uh what else? Every other thing, basically, every other item or every other piece of accessory is a, like the word suggests, it's an accessory. It's just an accompaniment. It doesn't really hold weight. If you want to look at it eternally, nothing really holds weight. Nothing that we do holds weight. But if you want to compare them to the basic necessities of life, it doesn't really hold weight. Once you have food, shelter and clothing, you're good to go. Why am I saying all of this? When you're stuck in survival mode, it is very easy to not expect abundance. Now, this particular conversation was worded, the title of this conversation was worded specifically to make reference to the disciples when they met Jesus. Now, these dudes have been toiling all day. They were in their boats, fishermen, a fisherman, and it's not an uncommon thing to be a fisherman back in that time and in that dispensation. They were fishermen and they had been toiling all day. Nothing had come forth, nothing had happened. They had not made any great catch. And then this man walks up to them and says, "Oh, what's going on? I want to talk to you guys." And they're, we haven't made any great catch. So, bruh, if you could wait a minute, let us make this catch so that we could sell something that we could use to eat, so that I could take some home to my wife, to my mother in law. I could eat some for myself and I can make some money so that I keep my business afloat. And Jesus looks at them and says, "Cast your nets again." And they cast their nets. And this time around, their nets could not hold the fish. Their nets, they were shocked because this was the greatest catch they had ever gotten. They were trying to pull all the fishes in. They were trying to reel the fishes in, and it wasn't. And this story, this story, when you put it into a modern perspective, when we think about back then, they used large nets because they were expecting more than one fish. They were expecting a couple of fishes, maybe more than a couple. They were expecting a couple of fishes, yeah, maybe more than a couple of fishes. But this day, you see how people fish with a hook and a line. I just imagine as I think about this story, what if you cast your hook into the sea, expecting to reel in, say, a rainbow trout or mackerel or Titus fish, and then you I don't know, you've seen it dramatized in movies where the person is like, "Oh, it's a big one," and he's trying to really back in, and I do not know the terminologies, but the rod that holds the line is bending, it's arching, and you're like, "Oh my goodness, this is going to break." And then when they finally reel it in, it's like one humongous fish. And that is just one fish. Now imagine if you threw it with the bait and 10,000 fishes hook onto that bait. How are you going how are you going to prepare for that? And so this episode isn't really just talking about abundance. It's talking about how to it's me bringing to our consciousness, or bringing it to the fore, a question: how do we prepare for abundance? A a key subject in the Bible again is the Zarephath woman. This woman was owing a bunch of people. There were people she was owing. She could not pay them because ends were not meeting. And then the prophet comes to her house and she narrates, and she feeds the prophet. She feeds him. This is a wonderful story of how scarcity and how a physical scarcity does not affect a mental scarcity or something. I say I'm going to talk about scarcity in another episode, so I don't want to digress. But long story short, she feeds the prophet, and the prophet says, gather vessels, not but a few. Don't gather little. Gather as much vessels as you can. And this woman brings a couple of vessels. And he prayed, and of course, these vessels were filled with more than enough oil for her to sell and to pay back what she owed. Not just paying back what she owed, but to have even much more. But here was the caveat: the blessing or that miracle stopped when there were no longer vessels to contain it. And it's like we often say when we read the Old Testament, that the Old Testament is a typification. It's God uses stories, or stories like that, things like that, to typify something. And it's an indication of, I don't know, expectations is what I want to say. It's an indication of expectations. When we ask for a blessing from God, when we ask, say we toil morning, afternoon, night, we ask so much: God, bless the work of my hands, bless whatever it is I'm doing. I want to get a well-paying job, a job that pays in 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 figures. I'm starting a business and I want to scale it. I've started a business and I want to scale it to start making 8 figures every month. Whatever it is, whatever prayer you've tallied before God, is the word is tallied the right word? Brought, whatever prayer you've brought before God. Now, when you make those prayers, when you make those petitions, when you cry out to Him from the recesses of your heart, you need to believe that He's going to answer, and then you need to prepare for the abundance. First, you need to prepare your mind, and then you need to make every necessary preparation. Because when the abundance comes and there is nothing, when the oil comes and the vessels are not enough, the oil will cease. That's not to say that God's blessings are conditional or anything. That's not to say, I'm not trying to imply a conditional nature to God's blessings, that oh, you have to do XYZ for your blessings to continue. No, that's not what I'm implying. What I'm saying is, usually what we get is a result of our expectations. Whatever we see, whatever we receive from God, is as a result of our expectations. If we expect that, that is the reason why pastors, teachers, people who disciple others, leaders, spiritual leaders, make a claim, and should make a claim for the ones that do not, that we're not to restrict God. I have an episode called Don't Restrict God. You should do well to listen to it. Why not to put God in a box, confine Him, restrain Him? It sounds very blasphemous for me to say that you restrain God. But I promise you, it's not blasphemy. We restrain God oftentimes and we don't realize. We give Him this confine. You have to work God, you have to work within this squared circle. Don't exceed it. Don't exceed it marginally to the left, right, up or down. I don't want to work within these confines. And if you see it like that, that's what you expected, man. So how do you limit a limitless God with your expectations? How do you make finite an infinite creature with your expectations? How do you constrain an inconstrainable, if that's even a word, with your expectations? So the reason the nets will not hold the fish, or the reason the vessels, the oil stopped, is because there aren't enough vessels, and you weren't really prepared for abundance. So abundance, I will say, is a mindset before a reality. I mean, people have abundant resources, but when you look at what you have and you say, this thing no do, it's not given, it's not enough, it won't be enough, and it will never be enough. There are people who are in well, this is not to say that now this is where I have to put balance to it. I'm not saying you should not be ambitious. I'm not saying you should settle. I will never advocate for settling. You just have a whiff of success, perceived success, and then you settle. You don't do anything. You're not ambitious. You don't pursue after any other thing. I'm not saying that you should never do that. I'm saying you should be content as well, but you should also be ambitious. That's one. There's also a fine line between expecting abundance and delusion, because abundance, I will say, goes hand in hand. Your expectation go hand in hand with work, with input. Sometimes your input will not, the expected, or the result you see isn't directly proportional to your input, and that is just the mercy of God. If you see something bigger than the input you put in, it is the mercy of God. It is Him encouraging you to keep going, because He has seen how much heart and how much soul, how much grit and sweat you've put into something. But if there's no work and you're having expectations, and you're delusional. Sorry to say, but you're delusional. So expect abundance, prepare for abundance, but then you have to put in the work. The reason why Egypt was able to last through the 7 years of famine was because they put in the work during the 7 years of harvest. So if there's a time for sowing and you do not sow, and the time for harvest comes after you've sown and you do not reap, when the time of famine comes, you will not have in your storehouse. And if God is merciful enough, which He is, you're going to find someone in Egypt who's going to offer you grain and refuge. But if that's not the case, then glory be to God. Yeah? Yeah. Thank you for listening. I just wanted to talk about abundance, and it's something that I'm learning and I wanted to share with you guys. Thank you for listening. Follow, share, subscribe. Uh the whole 9 yards. And God bless you. I'll see you on the other side. Not other side, but I'll see you in the next episode. Toodles.